The feeling after a courageous conversation, it's kind of like the feeling after sex. You're like, oh my God, that was so good. Thank God we did that. It moves the energy. It takes the contraction and puts it back into coherence. And when we take that contraction and we put it back into coherence, there's just so much more resource.
Can't be contained.
That's what I'm talking about. Friendship is a spiritual practice. It takes effort. It takes investment. It takes a lot in order to have strong, powerful friendships that have like this true bond, and so many people are so terrified to be in connection. So many people are so terrified to be in sisterhood, and for great reason, right? If we look back at our world, I remember, God, so many times in high school. Like, I remember this, I was going to call her a B, but I won't. Respect. I remember this woman in high school told everyone that I went to fat camp, and it just spread like wildfire throughout the entire world. And I remember making a decision in that moment, like, I can't trust women to not fuck with me. I can't trust people to not have my back. Like, what the fuck? And that one moment is crazy, right? When you go back to the moment where the impression, like the hurt happened, that took so much breath work and so much therapy to actually rewire that, let that go somatically in my body and come back and be like, no, women are amazing. And that one was a shithead, but most women are amazing. And I deserve to have beautiful, thriving relationships that feel so energizing and just it brings me to tears, the quality of relationships that I have in my life now. But I made a decision that I was going to show up as a friend that was there through thick and through thin. And so the biggest message that I want to share on today's show is you don't know someone until you're in conflict with them. You do not know someone until you're in conflict with them. And this has been a huge lesson this year. And I didn't even know I needed this lesson. I didn't ask for this lesson. I certainly didn't ask for this lesson, but I got this lesson this year. Some women in my life who I had never been in conflict with, I was in conflict with, or more specifically speaking, they were in conflict with our friendship group. And when shit got hard, they bounced, like cut and run, I'm out. And I got to really observe their character in conflict. And now translating that, or now contrasting that with some of my dearest friends in the world. They are my dearest friends in the world because during conflict, during moments of tension, during moments where we didn't see eye to eye or we had a difference of opinion, there was still so much love. There was so much respect. There was no withdrawing of love or abandonment or lack of support. It was like, hey, I love you and I see you and I'm right here with you and I'm not going anywhere. And here's what I believe, and here's my opinion on this situation, and here's how I've been impacted. And we get to have these conversations that are just so amazing. So until you're in that place with someone, you don't know their character, you don't know their survival strategies, you don't know what type of crap is going to come to the surface when they're faced with tension. Whether it's they run away, whether it's they blame and judge you, whether they project things onto you, whether they manipulate. Like, there's so many things that are so much easier, quote unquote, easier than having a courageous conversation. But it's actually not true. Like, our ego will tell us that to the day we die, like run away, lie about it, manipulate, throw shade, judge them, whatever it is. Like, our ego will be like, that's the easier option. But it's not true. The best option, the path of least resistance, the path to get you to your end goal, which oftentimes is the exact same as theirs, is sitting in the fire, sitting in the crunch, sitting in the moments of being like, this is so fucking uncomfortable. Oh my God. And owning our side of the street, owning our side of the street. One of my friendships, it like makes me, I can feel myself getting emotional even telling the story because I'm so proud of this. We met about 10 years ago, and probably year 2 or 3 of our friendship, we had a riff in our friendship. And there was something in my body that was like, this relationship is worth fighting for. This relationship is so important to me. This person is so important to me. And it took a long while, like probably about a year and a half or so, for us to come back into connection. And today, 10 years later, our relationship is so strong and it's so beautiful. And I'm truly so proud of it. And it's one of my greatest sources of joy in my life. And that wouldn't have been possible if her and I both weren't willing to stand in the fire together and say, I acknowledge I hurt you. I acknowledge that sucks. I acknowledge that I fucked up. And here's what I'm going to do in order to make sure that you never experience that again. And deep relationships, deep connections, which is, when people ask people who are dying, like what their greatest source of joy is, it's always relationships. It's not the fact that we worked so much or we had a huge social media followings or we had so much money or it's like the relationships, right? Well, to get to the depth of relationships that we all deeply crave and deeply desire, it's not a matter of if are we going to have conflict. It's a matter of when we're going to have conflict, when that's going to happen. And if those relationships can move through conflict and there is a high level of respect as you're moving through conflict, and we're not shaming, we're not blaming, we're not making people wrong, we're not maybe what they did was wrong. Like maybe what they did was wrong, but how can we not shame them and get to like the root of like what need was this person ultimately trying to meet through doing that behavior? And then I also want to say in this, use your discernment, right? Use your discernment. If that person is straight up toxic, like get the fuck out of there. Don't be in relationships with people who are genuinely toxic. That's when you have to have boundaries. So have discernment around that. But if it is just general misunderstandings, not seeing eye to eye, like that type of stuff is so easy for us to overcome if we're both willing to sit in the fire of uncomfort and burn away everything that needs to be burned away and both come out of that as more evolved, grounded, beautiful versions of ourselves. Like that's where we get to go. That's where we get to go. And so I hear from you guys all the time how much you want sisterhood and how much you want deep connection and friendship and community. And it is like, hallelujah. Of course, yes, that's the deepest desire of all of us. We want community. We want connection. But asking ourselves, who do I get to be in order to cultivate those types of relationships? Figure out like what your shit is that you bring into a relationship. Like when Eric and I first started dating, I was like, yo, bro, here's my shit that I'm bringing. Here's my baggage. When I get triggered, I want to run away. When I get triggered, I'm like, peace. I'm hopping on a one-way ticket to Bali. Like, see you later. That was fun. Like, that's not my truth, but that's my trigger. That's the shit I bring to the relationship. So it's important to have a high level of self-awareness for you to ask yourself, what is it that I bring to the relationship? What are my things? And am I willing to work on those things so that we can have more connection, more coherence, and more love in this relationship? We're going to bump up against each other. We're going to bump up against our shit. This is just humaning at its core level. We're going to do that. But how can we lean in? And there's a beautiful frame where it's not me against you. It's us against the problem. So how can we create that triangle versus that combative nature and go, okay, here's me and here's you. And there's this issue here and we're both involved in this thing and we're going to solve this. I'm not trying to fix you. You're not trying to fix me, but there's a thing here. And we get to talk about that and we get to figure out what that thing is. And we get to do our absolute best to try and solve that thing, whatever that thing is, so that we both experience deeper healing and deeper freedom. At the end of the day, whether it is a friendship, whether it is a romantic relationship, or whether it is a relationship within your business, all relationships are here to evolve us. They're portals for healing. And when we allow them to be that, not all the time. Like, I think there's like a dark side to this as well, where like two spiritual people get into a relationship, they're like, we gotta heal all the time and we gotta find our wounds and we gotta, it's like, that shit sucks. like, yes, and like not all the fucking time, right? Like, yes, let the relationship be a container for healing. But if you guys get into like healing loops with your partners and like you're not having fun, like don't do that. I was in a relationship once when I first moved to San Diego that had a flavor of that, and I was like, bleh, ugh. Like everywhere I turn, it's like a trigger, and we got to process. And it's like my full-time job is processing your childhood wounds, and I'm not having fun anymore. What happens when I don't have fun? I am out. Bless his soul. So the relationship is a container for healing, but not all the time. It's not a full-time job. And so whether it is romantic, friendship, business, this happens in my business too. And I am so grateful. I actually sent a text to one of my team members this morning. Actually, I'm going to read it. I'm going to read my text. I sent a text to him this morning because for the last 90 days or so, him and I have been rubbing. We've had like a bit of a rub, meaning a little bit of in our relationship. Like there's so much love and we are so connected and it's so great. But there's been like a little bit of like a crunch, right? And so yesterday we had the most amazing conversation where we both showed up so honest. And it wasn't a blame or shame. It was like, hey, what's going on for you in this? And I was like, hey, this is my experience in this. What's going on for you? And he's like, hey, this is my experience. And I was like, oh, okay, I get how I do shit and it rubs you. And you now get how you do shit and it rubs me. And it's not personal, but it's what it is. And now I know how to love you better. Now I know how to respect you better. Now I know how to appreciate you better. So I said, yo, homie, I really, really appreciate you. Thank you for being so willing to meet me in the uncomfortable places to strengthen our connection. I trust you. I believe you and I appreciate you. I believe in you and I appreciate you. And I really mean what I said yesterday. I value you so deeply, and my deepest desire is for us to have a rock solid connection to keep slaying pause for years to come. You're the freaking best. I think I made him cry of happiness. I won't read his back in case some of you guys know who I'm talking about, but it was an opportunity to get real. And when we name the conversation underneath the conversation, it really sets people free. When we name the conversation underneath the conversation. So it's like, here I am as a human posturing as like, I am the CEO of Pause. And here he is in his role, posturing as his role at Pause. And so those two roles are just in communication and they were in a little bit of conflict. But then underneath, there's like my humanness and my vulnerabilities and my desires and my just like child parts. And then there's his and all of his child parts. And when we can meet that and we can get real about that, that's where the work actually starts. Or else we're just trying to be right. Like, no, I'm right. No, you're right. Like it gets to that conversation. So when we really name the conversation underneath the conversation, then we can set each other free and then we can actually solve the root issue. Because what ended up happening in this particular thing is like there was this root issue where like we're not considering, there was like a lack of understanding and consideration, not intentionally, it just is what it was. But then there was like all of these secondary issues that were popping up and we're trying to solve the things that were popping up, but not addressing what was actually causing it. And so again, this can happen in business. This can happen with your romantic relationship. This can happen with your friendships. This can happen with your brother. This can happen with your sister. And so how can we address the humanness? How can we just name what might be there? And there's this beautiful thing. It's really amazing actually when, you know, we can kind of feel these like tension bubbles and they're bubbling and the tension bubble is bubbling and like it's percolating and like something's happening and it's like, whoa, what's going on? And then it's kind of like getting a little like tighter and contracted and it's like, ah! And then all it takes is one person to go boop and name it. And then it's like, oh, thank God. You know, feeling after a courageous conversation, it's kind of like the feeling after sex. You're like, oh my God, that was so good. Thank God we did that. It moves the energy. It takes the contraction and puts it back into coherence. And when we take that contraction and we put it back into coherence, there's just so much more resource. So that was a lot of things about a lot of things about a lot of things when it comes to relationships. But the truth is just like when you go to the gym, you need resistance to strength. Oh, look at those biceps. I'm just kidding. You need resistance to strengthen your muscles so that they're stronger. Relationships are the same thing. You know, when Eric and I have like a rub or a tension, I'm like, oh, cool. Like this sucks. And I'm excited to see how we evolve through this, because every single contraction, every single rub, every single tension, every single point of conflict that him and I have had have built us into stronger versions of ourselves. Every single relationship, female relationship or male relationship that I have that's a friend, the strongest ones have had a little bit of a rub, a little bit of a conflict. And we've been able to just be so respectful, not withdraw love or be reactive or let our childhood parts take over, but just so honest and so true. And Brené Brown, I love this frame that she uses. She says, the story I'm making up is this. And that's a beautiful one to use in relationships when you're in conflict. The story I'm making up is, by you not doing that, you don't care about me or you don't consider me, or the story I'm making. So it's not like, hey, this is the absolute truth. This is a story of my child part, and the story that they're making up is this. Is that true? And then we can really lay it all out on the table, and it's not the blame shame game, but it's the, hey, I've got a story about this. Just tell me this isn't true so I can put this story to sleep. Because the ego, the mind, just wants to spin and spin and spin and spin and spin. So it takes a self-leader. Like, being in healthy, connected relationships requires a different version of us. It requires this like real self-leader version of us to like step up to the game, to go, you know what? We're going to play a new game here. I'm going to go first. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to name my parts. I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to clean up my side of the street. And my experience is all it takes is one person to do that. And when one person does that, there's an opening, there's a deepening. And then we can just create more intimacy, more connection, and more love. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Can't Be Contained podcast. If this was helpful for you, my only ask that I'm ever going to ask you is please share the show with people that you love. Share it on your story. If there was something in this episode that you found valuable, that you think would be valuable to someone that you love, my deepest ask would be for you to share it with the people in your world. All right, have an amazing rest of your day, and we'll catch you on the Can't Be Contained podcast next week. Peace.
Can't be contained.